On this episode of How to Bronco, we're talking hero switches. On this episode of How to Bronco, Lauren and I are going to dive into the off-road hero switches that are located on the top of the dash of your Bronco.
We know it can be confusing as to when and why to use them, and we're going to share our experience with the hope it helps you out when you are out using your Bronco as it was intended.
The hero switches available on the 6th Gen Bronco vary by model. In this video, we're going to speak to all the available ones, and you can decide which are relevant to you. With that said, these are the hero switches that are available. You have a sway bar disconnect, front locker, rear locker, trail turn assist, and traction control.
The front and rear lockers do exactly what the name says. They lock the front and or rear axles so they always spin together. You want these enabled when you need maximum traction, such as steep climbs and any terrain in which there is a chance a wheel will be lifted off the ground and get light, such as any big articulations in the rocks or very uneven terrain. Anytime I am off-road, I like to have the rear locker on and I toggle the front locker as needed depending on what is in front of me. You engage and disengage the locker at any moment on the Bronco simply by pressing the hero switches. You do not want the locker on when driving on the street as the massive amounts of traction put the drivetrain in a bind. You also do not want the front locker on while executing turns as it decreases the turning radius significantly.
All right, we're going to demonstrate the front and rear locker. So Lauren is in 4 low, no lockers on right now. Very loose surface. You can see the front left is spinning, the rear right is spinning because of the weight of the vehicle. So the tires with the least amount of load without the lockers on will spin. You can see the front's a bit drooped out, front left, and the rear left is a bit tucked, so that means that the right side of it is drooped out. So that's why they're spinning. They had the least load on them. So he's going to put the lockers on, put the front locker and rear locker on, and it should drive right up. It's nice keeping momentum, right on up it. Barely any wheel slip. It's important in these terrains too to not mash the throttle. Just keep a nice consistent flow of momentum, not too aggressive, because when you get aggressive, that's when you break things.
You also do not want the front locker on for high-speed off-roading. For those that are new to off-roading and are in doubt if you will make a climb or an obstacle, it's better to have the locker on so that you have the extra traction in the case you need it versus getting jammed up because you did not have it engaged.
This button is called the sway bar disconnect. I'm sure you can guess it disconnects the sway bar. This allows for maximum articulation and even better ride in the slower, rough terrains. If I'm going under 20 miles per hour off-road, I have this disconnected. The really cool thing about this feature on the Bronco is that you can engage and disengage this even if it's loaded. It will automatically reconnect at 20 miles per hour, so keep that in mind if you're running high and low speed terrains in the same outing. All right, so now we're going to demonstrate the sway bar disconnect. So in a perfect world, you would never get yourself in this situation because when you're doing this type of terrain, you just want to have the sway bar disconnected. Like I said before, on a 20 miles an hour off-road, I've got the sway bar disconnected. But Lauren's going to go ahead and press the sway bar disconnect, drop this wheel down, and is going to show you guys the maximum articulation of the Bronco. So drop the Bronco just to touch the ground. You can see how much that was, probably about 4 to 6 inches of additional articulation. You can see now that the front wheel is fully tucked in the fender before there was a gap before we pressed that button. So just a really great demonstration of what the actual sway bar disconnect does. And like I mentioned before, you can do this loaded or unloaded, which is an amazing feature of the Bronco.
This switch is the Trail Turn Assist, and in my opinion, it's one of the coolest technologies on the Bronco. This is for when you're running those tighter trails, and with this engaged, it's going to apply brake to the inside rear wheel when it's turning and enables a much sharper turn versus the need for a multi-point turn. I also find it fun to do some donuts every now and then, but for this to work, the Bronco must be in 4-wheel drive. You can activate this as needed on the trail or just leave it on. Personally, I like to engage at 50 to 75 feet before the obstacle will need its assistance at. Do not use this feature on the street as you will put the drivetrain in a bind. Vaughn's going to demonstrate the trail turn assist, which is one of the really cool technologies in the Bronco. It measures off a steering angle, and you can see it locking that inside tire to help him pivot around the trees. It's one of those things that we use like whenever we're whipping in and out of the trees or we're in the sand dunes, we lock that inside tire and do some cool donuts. So it's a really awesome thing that Ford left us for all the Broncos.
No Austin power turns here. The last gear switch we're going to speak to is traction control. I do not suggest using the switch unless you are an experienced driver. One press of this turns the traction control off, which will allow the wheels to slip when you're going in a straight line. If the onboard safety systems see any sort of sideways action, also known as yaw, it will reduce or cut power. This switch is useful in situations when you are navigating a slick terrain off-road and the safety systems kick in and cut power. You can simply press this button once and regain all control. If you're an experienced driver and want to have some extra fun and freedom behind the wheel, you can fully turn off Advanced Track by holding this button for 5 seconds. Think of it as a cheat code, as it fully disables the traction control and stability control, which allows sliding and wheel spin with no intervention.
I hope everybody learned something on this episode of How to Bronco.
Let us know in the comments below what else you want us to talk about and what your favorite hero switch is. As always, have fun, friends.